In the city of Fujite, situated in the southern territory of the Olzano Empire, there's a magical academy. A pupil of the magical academy named Rumia meets with her companion Sistine and begins heading to the academy. The greatest sorcerers and enchanters of the Olzano Empire have graduated from this notorious academy, so it's a dream for anyone to enter here. Sistine discloses that she is an aristocrat, unlike Rumia, who is merely a commoner, but they still regard each other as family. On their way, the two girls nearly collide with a sprinting boy named Glenn. But at the last moment, Sistine uses her wind sorcery to blast him away. Glenn plunges into a fountain, but still behaves gallantly toward the girls to impress them, even though he was the one who lunged into them like a lunatic. He tells the girls to walk cautiously in traffic next time. Glenn believes that he is not responsible and begins accusing both of them. He then looks at the two girls for the first time, and for no reason begins to do a full body examination of Rumia. He inquires if they have encountered each other before, but before he can get his response, Sistine once again blasts him away with her sorcery for touching Rumia without any consent and walks off. The two girls then enter their classroom and discover that their new temporary teacher has not yet arrived. All of the students become anxious, as no instructor has ever been tardy before, and start to protest. Glenn enters the classroom and announces that he is the temporary teacher. Sistine becomes stunned upon seeing him, but Glenn completely rejects everything that occurred in their earlier meeting. He attempts to deliver his introduction, but Sistine tells him to move past it and begin the class already. Meanwhile, a lecturer named Hallie presents the very unimpressive resume of Glenn to the headmaster and complains about assigning a subpar mage like him the role of a substitute teacher. Hallie doubts whether Glenn is even qualified to instruct their school's gifted students and thinks that he will merely loaf around. Glenn validates him as he tells the students to study on their own for today's session and then goes to take a nap. The headmaster, Rick, reads Glenn's resume and realizes that he doesn't even possess a teaching permit. What? But he still has faith in Glenn, as he was recommended by another professor named Celica. Professor Celica arrives there and cautions Hallie to stop criticizing Glenn, and promises Rick that she will take full accountability for Glenn if he fails. Glenn gets compelled by Sistine to educate them at least a little, so he scribbles some runic incantations on the board with no effort at all. His instructional method is so dull and lifeless that the students lose motivation. Still, a girl named Lynn asks him to clarify what he wrote on the board, which appears to be in a foreign tongue. But Glenn is so indolent that he tells the students to decipher it themselves by using a lexicon. Sistine becomes furious, as that's not how a teacher should talk. But before she can compel him to instruct them again, the bell rings and Glenn gleefully exits the class. At the girls' restroom, Sistine and Rumia change their attire and do suspicious activities in front of the other girls when Glenn suddenly bursts in there unintentionally and gets assaulted by the girls for it. Later, in the cafeteria, Sistine looks over at the floating sky citadel called Melgalius and yearns to uncover its enigmas. Glenn chooses to take a seat with them, begins to consume his meal, and offers some of it to Rumia. Sistine still remains furious at Glenn and gets prepared to tell him how terrible of an instructor he is, but before Glenn gets disgraced by Sistine in front of everyone, he intentionally pushes some beans into her mouth so that she can't utter a word, which irritates her even more. Celica glances up at the sky and recollects when she first proposed Glenn to be the provisional teacher at the Magic Academy. He initially refused it because he believed that he was not competent for it, but Celica intimidated him so much that he was compelled to join as an educator. Glenn begins his second lecture of today and again tells the students to learn on their own. He repeats the same instruction at the third lecture as well, so Sistine threatens to proceed with getting him dismissed using her aristocratic father's authority, but Glenn feels more than delighted that he will finally be dismissed and won't have to exert any effort anymore. That pushes Sistine's patience, and she dares Glenn to a magical duel. She tells him that if he fails this duel, he has to amend his poor conduct that he has displayed and teach class diligently from now on. Witnessing her dedication towards her education reminds Glenn of someone, so he finally becomes earnest and accepts her challenge. So they head to the school grounds for their battle alongside all the other pupils in the class. Glenn decides to give her an advantage by using only one incantation named Shock Bolt, since he thinks highly of himself. The brightest pupil in the class explains that Shock Bolt is a protective spell used to immobilize adversaries and thinks that Glenn will triumph if he casts his spell quicker than her. Their duel starts shortly after as she summons a spell called Thunder Sprites, and Glenn takes it directly and instantly loses the duel. He requests a 3-round duel but gets bested every time. As Sistine has won this duel, Glenn now has to accept her conditions and become a reliable teacher. Glenn behaves as if nothing occurred even after losing the duel and acts unmotivated in the next lecture as well. Lynn reluctantly asks him about something that she didn't comprehend about runic magic again, but Sistine tells her that she is just wasting her time on that worthless mage. She tells Lynn that Glenn doesn't understand the greatness or importance of magic, so Glenn gets insulted and tells her that there's nothing magnificent about magic. He believes that magic is only effective for eliminating people and that it is 10 times mightier than sword techniques. He begins to ramble on about how much of a good-for-nothing is magic, which disheartens everyone in class. Sistine can't bear it any longer and slaps him for having an opinion, then dashes out of the class. Later, Glenn realizes that he was being disrespectful towards Sistine and chooses to resign this position before harming someone, but then he suddenly only notices Rumia sketching a magic circle in the distance, so he instantly heads there to assist her construct it properly. He adds Mercury to Rumia's magic circle and tells her to give it a try now, so she recites the spell and the magic circle begins shining. Seeing her astonishment, Glenn recollects when he was once an inspired child like her. Afterward, Rumia realizes that Glenn genuinely admires magic after seeing him so devoted to assisting her earlier and asks him what he was doing before he became an instructor here. Glenn bluntly tells her that he was lodging in Professor Salika's house, but doesn't want to go into any further specifics. He then asks Rumia why all the students become so frantic when it comes to magic. Rumia explains that she wants to comprehend magic more to repay her obligations to someone. Apparently she was abducted by wicked mages and nearly slain 3 years ago, but the Mage of Justice rescued her life, so she realized that she desired to safeguard humanity as well by studying magic further, and she hopes that maybe she will be able to thank the Mage of Justice one day. Glenn again takes a closer glance at her, but then silently strolls away. At Sistine's residence, she remembers when her grandfather told her about his final wish, which was to step into Melgalius's levitating sky citadel. She, as a child, vowed to become a greater mage than him so that she could unveil the mysteries of Melgalius for him. The next day, Glenn bends down and apologizes to everyone in class for his conduct. He begins the class by informing all of the students that they don't know anything about magic. For today's lesson, Glenn decides to instruct everyone in the exact incantation that was used on him by Sistine in their duel, Shock Bolt, but the students have already perfected that spell and claim to be superior at it than Glenn. Glenn tells them that they truly understand nothing about Shock Bolt and demonstrates that chanting differently will alter the spell's outcome. He reveals to the students that he actually possesses a broader understanding of magic than anyone else in the room and explains magic's genuine meaning. According to him, magic is about seizing the hearts of mankind, so he illustrates by proposing to Sistine, which causes her to blush, and provides an example of her, saying that affecting the world using words is the core of magic. To verify that, he invents a chant of his own and uses it to cast a spell. So he tells them that even they can adjust a chant if they know the essentials and don't require any books to help them advance. After making them grasp what magic is, he begins to teach them the principles of magic. He captures the full focus of the class with his remarkable lecture and concludes the day with triumph. This time, Glenn genuinely feels positive about being an instructor. Celica comes to him to praise him, as she has grown to be proud of him. She tells him that now that he is finally committed to teaching correctly, she will be departing with all the other instructors to a magic conference the next day. Later, Sistine and Rumia realize that Glenn is actually a superb magic educator, but Sistine still regards him as a lowlife. Rumia suddenly remembers that she didn't get along with Sistine at first, but now that they are closest friends, she believes that Sistine and Glenn will get along too. On the opposite side, two malicious mages discuss their sinister scheme, and one of them claims that a man named Glenn can be a hindrance to them, but their boss tells them he cannot do anything to them and commands them to continue as planned. The next day, Glenn awakens late and dashes straight toward the Magic Academy again, but then he detects a sinister presence trailing him, so the wicked mage exposes himself and employs his corruption magic to eliminate Glenn. At Sistine's class, the two dark mages from earlier named Bob and Rob arrive there saying they are Glenn's replacements, but Sistine knows that they don't have any justification to be there, so she decides to contact security, but Bob threatens to eliminate her with his military grade magic before she can call security and tells everyone to comply fly if they wish to survive. The two mages then disclose that they are searching for a girl named Rumia. Bob proceeds to harm Sistine to extract information from her, so Rumia surrenders, hoping that Glenn will come rescue her. But Rob tells them that their instructor is already deceased. Rob then takes Rumia away and unveils that Rumia is actually a princess, while Bob escorts Sistine to an isolated room to exploit her. But before he can force himself on her, Glenn arrives to save the moment. Bob uses his magic on Glenn, but his spells are nullified as Glenn reveals that he possesses an original incantation called the Fool's World that can suppress all magic within a specific radius. But that implies that he can't also wield his magic. How exactly is a mage supposed to battle if he disables his own magic? He strikes Bob and knocks him unconscious with his military-level hand-to-hand skills. After subduing Bob, Glenn makes sure Sistine is unharmed. He learns from Sistine that the other mage, Rob, abducted Rumia, so he wonders why she was targeted, since he has captured the mage named Carol who was trailing him earlier. He considers extracting information from him. Celica contacts Glenn and learns from him that a covert organization of wicked mages called Research of the Divine Wisdom has seized the entire Magic Academy. Glenn speculates that they have a spy inside the Magic Academy, as no intruders would have been able to penetrate its protection that easily. So he asks Celica to investigate to uncover who the traitor is, and tells her to request the Court Mage Corporation for reinforcement. But Celica clarifies that she lacks the authority to initiate any measures, so Glenn becomes despondent. Sistine realizes that Glenn was correct when he said that magic is good for nothing. It's because of it her friend was kidnapped. Glenn comforts her by saying that he will personally handle the situation and eliminate the other evil mages. Suddenly, bone golems emerge out of a magic circle. But since Glenn's magic nullification spell is active, he can't activate his magic, so they start running away. The two work together to make Sistine summon a great spell to keep the bone golems from coming any closer, so Glenn uses a high-level spell called Extinction Ray to completely defeat them, but then he falls to the ground. So Sistine realizes that he has a mana deficiency, which makes it hard for him to use high-level spells. Their way is blocked again by another evil mage named Rake, who has already summoned golden swords. Glenn realizes that there is no way out of this, so he pushes Sistine off the edge to fight alone against Rake, but he knows that he cannot use his magic nullification spell Fool's World anymore. His Rake already has a spell active, so he uses his fist to stop the magic swords from coming at him. Glenn looks for a way to land a hit on Rake, but to no avail, so Glenn comes up with a plan and gets stabbed by all of Rake's swords deliberately to give Sistine the opening to dispel the sword's magic. Glenn then uses one of the swords to kill the mage. Sistine reveals that when Glenn pushed her off the edge, she landed safely on the bushes and then climbed back up, saving Glenn's life. They start heading back to take down the others, but Glenn falls to the ground because of too much blood loss. Sistine tries using a healing spell on him, but it fails. Glenn realizes that he is about to die and remembers that he always wanted to be a mage of justice. He finds himself waking up to Celica's call and seeing that Sistine has become unconscious while using her healing spell. Glenn learns from Celica that the evil mages cannot get out of the school anymore, so Glenn figures out that the mages are actually trying to rewrite the destination of a teleportation circle to make their escape. He immediately starts heading to the tall tower where the teleportation circle is in, finds Rumia with a professor named Huey. Huey reveals himself to be the mole, and tells Glenn he intends to sacrifice himself to teleport Rumia back to his organization and also blow up the entire academy. But Huey explains that Glenn can still save the day if he counters the teleportation circle binding Rumia. Glenn understands and uses his blood as a catalyst to rewrite the teleportation circle's binding, but that was the first layer of the 5 circles that he needs to unbind. He goes on to undo all of them while losing his blood, and he tells Rumia that he has always wanted to be the mage of justice. He reaches the last layer but begins to cough up blood as he starts running out of mana. Rumia, with her strong will to help Glenn, reaches out her hand to get outside the barrier and completely heals Glenn with her divine magic, even amplifying his powers. Glenn wakes up realizing that she is special, and with her help, Glenn finally rewrites the teleportation circle and undoes the spell. Huey admits defeat as he takes Glenn's punch. Later, Glenn learns from Celica that Rumia is actually the princess. She had a special ability that is forbidden for royal blood and would eventually get prosecuted for it. That's the reason she faked her death 3 years ago and became a commoner. Glenn understands it and doesn't care much about it, even when it's it's a big secret. He decides to keep teaching and stay at the Magic Academy as he wishes to see his students' bright futures ahead. The Queen Alicia learns that her presumed deceased daughter, Princess Hermione, now identified as Rumia, is at the center of the incident at the Olzano Magic Academy, so she decides to travel to Olzano with High Commander Zelos to see Rumia. Alicia assumes that Rumia must resent her for what she did to her 3 years ago, but Rumia is far past that as she now has a fresh life with her companion Sistine. There's an interschool competition the following week, but no one wants to enroll, so Glenn shows up to inspire his students. He uses his sound judgment to choose the most capable students for each category based on their abilities and pledges them that he will help them win the tournament. It shows how well he has observed his students, and that makes Sistine feel pleased to see her awkward teacher finally becoming accountable. Glenn sees a memory of him going to the headmaster's office and asking the headmaster Rick to provide his pay in advance because he is penniless. But giving pay early is against the rules of the academy, so the headmaster tells him about a special reward that a teacher will get if their class wins the tournament next week. And that explains why Glenn is in it so earnestly. After setting up the teams, Glenn learns from the class scholar Jibble that they could just make only the top students engage in the rounds, even repeatedly, and that all the other classes are applying the same method too. Nice, but Sistine declares that she wants everyone in the class to join, so Glenn gets compelled to use his previously arranged team. He later sees Class 1 and his own Class 2 disputing over who will get the field to train for the upcoming contest. So Glenn comes to stop the clash and sees that Halle, the person who loathes him the most, is the class instructor of Class 1. Halle tries to provoke and ridicule Glenn and his class, and triumphs so much that Glenn wagers his 3-month salary on his team winning the upcoming tournament. Glenn instantly realizes that he has made a blunder, but it is too late to retreat. Sistine comes with her sharp wit and uses the school laws against Halle's class to make them leave the field, and soon Glenn's team begins to train with full dedication. The night before the contest, Rumia remembers being saved by the enigmatic Mage of Justice after being forsaken, so she keeps her hopes strong of encountering him again. She knows that her real mother, the Queen, will be arriving tomorrow, so she tells Sistine that no matter what happens, she will think of Sistine's parents as her own. They then come to dine with Sistine and her family, and it shows how joyful a family they are together. The next day, Queen Alicia arrives at Olzano and gets treated as the honored guest of the Magic Tournament. She declares the beginning of the competition, and with that, the rounds commence. Glenn's class excels as well initially, so Glenn takes credit for all of it, but then Holly comes to tease him again and sparks an argument. Salika sits beside Queen Alicia and discloses that they are both longtime companions. Alicia seems to recognize Glenn as well and hopes to see more from him. The round progresses, and with Class 2 excelling in most of the events, they reach rank 3. For the next round, it's mental defense, and Rumia takes part in it from Class 2. Just like the name suggests, it's an exam to assess their mental resilience. The evaluator uses his illusions one by one to eliminate the challengers, but Rumia and Class 5's Jalal remain firm. So the assessor then casts one of his more potent spells, which nearly makes Rumia tremble. Rumia keeps pushing on for her companions and kin, but she can only bear so much and collapses to the floor. But the examiner observes that her rival has been rendered unconscious even while he's upright, so he declares Rumia as the champion. The unexpected twist of fate causes Class 2 to leap to second place as Glenn exhales in relief. Two of his former comrades, Albert and Requisel, who are on a covert operation here, notice him after a long while. Requisel tries to contact Glenn, but Albert restrains him as their main mission is to monitor the Imperial Guards tasked with safeguarding the Queen. Albert reveals that they have received whispers of dubious conduct within the Imperial Guard and that they might attempt something against the Queen. Still, Requisel desires to resolve their dispute with Glenn. At lunch break, Lynn approaches Glenn and tells him that she wishes to trade with someone else for the upcoming event, which is the transmutation duel. Even though she adores transmutation matches, she isn't self-assured in her skills, so Glenn opts to encourage her by casting his own enchantment and morphing into Rumia. With this, Lynn finds the drive she needs to compete in the contest. Sistine gets deceived into assuming that Glenn is Rumia and hands him the sandwiches she made. She searches for Glenn but doesn't locate him anywhere, so she becomes irritated once again. The real Rumia arrives there, and Sistine realizes that the individual in front of her is Glenn, so she gets furious once more and blasts him away with her air magic. Rumia promptly dashes to Glenn's spot holding the sandwiches that Sistine prepared and hands them to him. She attempts to inform him that Sistine crafted those sandwiches for him, but the dense fool doesn't grasp it. The Queen Alicia finds her path there and asks Glenn for his presence. Meanwhile, the Imperial Guards become alarmed, seeing Her Majesty vanish abruptly, and Celica chuckles as she was the one who masked Alicia's location so that she could visit Glenn. Eleanor comes to Celica and murmurs something startling to her. Queen Alicia says sorry to Glenn for not being able to back him when he was dismissed from the Court Mage Corps a year ago, even though he dedicated his life to the kingdom. Glenn asks that she lift her head as he claims to have resigned by his own choice. But that shouldn't be why Alicia is here, so Glenn inquires about her motive. Queen Alicia clarifies that she only wants to make amends with Rumia, but Rumia rejects anything tied to being her lost daughter or even recognizing the queen and insists that she is merely a civilian named Rumia. Alicia understands that Rumia has moved on and no longer sees her as her mother. She respects her verdict and lets her leave. Then Alicia goes to head back to the stadium, but her route gets obstructed by her own Imperial Guards, led by Commander Zalos. Albert sees that the Imperial Guards are finally opposing the queen, so Requisel suggests just slaying them all at once. The tournament proceeds, and Class 2 keeps doing great. Sistine tells Glenn that Rumia hasn't returned yet, so Glenn informs her about what occurred earlier with the queen. Glenn adds that Rumia also brought the meal that Sistine prepared and tells her that he enjoyed her sandwiches. Hearing that, Sistine turns red with embarrassment, so she changes the subject and urges him to go find Rumia right away. Glenn locates Rumia sitting quietly near a tree examining a pendant. She tells Glenn that she senses there was something valuable inside that pendant, but she doesn't recall it anymore. Because Glenn now knows Rumia is the princess, she tells him why she was forsaken to start with. Apparently, Rumia is viewed as a demon, a forbidden existence because she was born with a unique gift, so she was deemed a danger and was discarded to secure the nation's future, and that's why she can never pardon her mother Alicia. She confesses that she still longs to call Alicia her mother, but she is now the child of Sistine's guardians, so there's a dilemma. Glenn comprehends what Rumia is enduring and tells her that he has walked a similar road where he has regretted many things himself, so he advises her to choose the path that will bring her the least sorrow by heeding her genuine emotions. He discloses to her that he was once a magician working in the Imperial Army. Due to the essence of his duty, which was capturing and eliminating corrupt mages, he had to visit the court frequently. During those periods, he saw the queen wearing the exact same pendant as Rumia's. Glenn thinks that the queen only wore that pendant because she cherished Rumia, so he encourages Rumia to follow her real emotions again and face the queen rather than fleeing endlessly. She realizes what she must do and asks Glenn to help her. Glenn cheerfully agrees, but the Imperial Guards hinder their way. They draw their blades, informing Rumia that she is accused of scheming to murder the queen, so Rumia is to be executed for betrayal and defaming royalty. The Imperial Guards announce that this is the queen's direct command, which leaves Rumia gravely wounded. She surrenders to the Imperial Guards, accepting her death, so the guards knock out Glenn and take Rumia away to execute her. In her dying moments, she remembers only her happy memories with her friends and family, but Glenn comes out of nowhere, blinding the Imperial Guards with his blinding light spell and knocking all of them unconscious. He then assumes the queen must be in danger, as she would never order her child's execution. War guards come their way, and Glenn escapes with Rumia. He looks for a way to find the queen and asks Celica if she is with her. Celica explains that she cannot do anything as she is taken hostage, and tells Glenn that he is the only one who can find a way to save both the queen and Rumia. She gives him a riddle by saying, "Can't do anything and only you," before ending the call. Glenn wonders how he will ever rescue the queen when she is heavily guarded by the Imperial Guards. He notices his two associates standing in the distance when Requisel attacks him with his great sword and causes a big explosion. We finally get the big reveal of what Eleanor whispered to Celica. She tells her that she had enchanted and placed the conditional death curse necklace around the queen's neck. She reveals that she is a member of the Researchers of Divine Wisdom organization and will use the queen for their noble mission. She then confidently tells Celica the only way to undo the death curse, thinking that she will never be able to accomplish it. According to Eleanor, the only way to save the queen is by paying a blood ransom by Sun. Back in the present, Requisel attacks Glenn with his military-grade magic and then summons a battle axe using alchemy. Glenn reveals that Requisel and Albert were his old associates of the court mages and thinks that these two are after him too, so he chants an ice spell, but Requisel dodges it and comes straight towards Glenn, while Albert prepares for long-range sniping magic. Glenn realizes realizes that he can't dodge and loses hope, but Albert's magic actually hits Riem, saving Glenn's life. Glenn tells Rumia that these two are his comrades from his old Imperial Army days. They serve in the Imperial Court Mage Corps Special Forces. Albert there is the Executioner number 17, the Star, and Requisel is number 7, the Chariot. Even though Glenn trusts the two, he still tells Rumia to be wary of them. Albert tells Glenn about the Imperial Guards holding Celica and the Queen hostage and assumes that they want to eliminate Rumia. Glenn doesn't understand why they are going after Rumia. They know that they can't think their way through this and must act quickly. So Requisel comes up with another straightforward, no bullshit strategy plan to attack the enemy from the front. But that's just way too dumb. Glenn doesn't understand why Celica can't do anything since she was Executioner number 21 when she was in the Special Forces. Even now, she is the best mage on the continent, so there must be something unusual going on. Meanwhile, Class 2 begins to lose their grasp of the competition as their mentor is gone, so Albert and Requisel come to the students and tell them that Glenn is out because something urgent came up. So Albert takes command of the class's Glenn substitute. Requisel assures Sistine that they can trust them, so she lets them be their temporary commander. The competition is in its final stages, and Class 2 must make a big comeback if they want to win. Hallie thinks that the victory will surely come to his class as Glenn is missing, and tells his student to crush Class 2 in the next transformation round. Hallie's student transforms into a ferocious dragon and impresses the judges. Lynn wonders how she will be able to top that, so Albert tells her to just enjoy herself out there, so she regains her confidence, transforms into an angel, and gets the perfect score. With Albert and Requisel's help, Class 2 again climbs up the leaderboard. For the elemental round, the Klassner Gibbon wins it, so it's now up to Sistine to win or lose it all, as it's the last round. Sistine knows that everyone is counting on her, so she must overcome her opponent, which she does with style. Class 2 becomes victorious and wins the competition. We see a glimpse of Glenn running away from the Imperial Guards while carrying Rumia, but ultimately he gets surrounded. It's almost about the time of sunset, and it's time for Her Majesty to present Class 2 with the winning medal. But instead of the students, Albert and Requisel come up on stage and reveal that they were Rumia and Glenn all along using transformation magic. Zelos wonders how they are here since they were supposed to be being chased by the Imperial Guards, so Glenn explains that he changed places with Albert and Requisel using the same magic. Zelos tries to attack Glenn, but Celica uses an isolation barrier to keep the guards outside the barrier. Zelos tells Glenn that he must kill Rumia, but can't explain why. He explains that the Queen must be protected at all costs and needs to make a sacrifice to preserve her life. He then asks the Queen what her decision is going to be, so the Queen ruthlessly orders Zelos to kill Rumia, as she cannot allow her to exist, and says that she regrets giving birth to her. Glenn knows that this is all a lie, but Rumia believes it. Celica doesn't say anything either, so Glenn tries to figure out what is going on and realizes that both Celica and the Queen are bound to be silent because of the necklace that the Queen is wearing. He charges towards the Queen after telling Rumia that her mother loves her more than everything and gets attacked by Zelos in the middle of the way. In that moment, the Queen successfully removes the necklace and its cursed effects. Glenn explains that the necklace had a conditional curse placed on it and had specific rules. If the wearer removes it, they die. If the time limit passes, they die. If anyone explains how to undo the curse, they die. And the only way to undo it is by killing Rumia. But since Rumia is alive, Zelos asks why the curse didn't activate. So Glenn reveals that he used his magic nullification spell called the Fool's Arcana to nullify the curse's effects when he got close enough to the Queen, and that's how she lived. The Queen apologizes to Rumia for those harsh words and reconciles with her. On the other side, Albert and Requisel find Elena and arrest her on charges of orchestrating the Queen and her daughter's demise. Albert asks why the heretic mages of the researchers of the Divine Kingdom are going after Rumia, so she gives them the clue, Akashic Records, before making her escape. They come back to Glenn to let him know about the researchers of the Divine Kingdom and tell him to be careful from now on before taking their leave. The Queen takes her leave too and tells Glenn and Celica to look after Rumia. Later, Rumia asks Glenn how he knew that her mom was lying, so Glenn begins to tell her the big backstory. When Rumia was abducted 3 years ago, the Queen begged Glenn to save her, saying Rumia was everything to her. Rumia realizes that Glenn is the Mage of Justice and thanks him for looking after her for all these years. They return to the place where Class 2 is celebrating and get harassed by drunk Sistine. It's dawn, and in the woods, Sistine and Glenn are acting very suspenseful, but actually, they're just training hand-to-hand combat. Sistine thought that she would get special training from Glenn, like learning new spells or boosting her magical powers, so she is a bit disappointed. Glenn explains that if she trains his way, she will hone her senses when it comes to actual duels, and that he will teach her military-grade magic as well, so that she can protect her friends. He adds that there's a dark side to military magic, but he is sure that she will get over it soon enough. Later in the morning, Sistine and Rumia find Glenn waiting for them on the way to school. Rumia realizes that he is worried about her, as she is now the main target of the researchers of the Divine Kingdom, so she tells him to rest easy. Requiselle comes out of nowhere in the Magic Academy dress and attacks Glenn. This disclaimer, no one knew what Requiselle's gender was in the previous episodes. That's why the writers put her in a school dress. Anyway, seeing Requiselle in the uniform, Glenn realizes that she's the new transfer student that the Imperial government assigned to be the bodyguard of Rumia. Requiselle clears up the misunderstanding and tells everyone that she is actually here to protect Glenn. She explains that she doesn't want to protect her and would rather protect Glenn, so Glenn tightens her loose screws and makes her understand that she has to protect Rumia. Glenn then takes her to the class and introduces her to the students, but she behaves dully just as Glenn did on his first day as a teacher here. So Glenn slowly whispers to her what to say to her new classmates, but even after that effort, she gets labeled a weirdo. A student assumes that Glenn and Requiselle are already acquainted, so he asks about their relationship. In reply, Requiselle says that Glenn is her everything and that she has devoted her life just to him. Her bold answer, although it excites the girls, makes the boys and Sistine heartbroken. To all Leaf Village ninjas, that is it for today. Recap, do not forget to join our clan, our army, my friend. You can do that by clicking that red button below the video. Destroy it for me with that bell. To follow us on YouTube with many videos to come in the following days. So see you later, bro. Peace out.